Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, nice to see you.
Happy Tuesday, Dr. Paul.
Well, it's Happy Tuesday for some people. The market's coming back again, they claim, but I guess we'll wait and see. Somebody has to sort this all out. And you know, yesterday there was some sorting out because, when a campaign's going on, the pundits like to ask, what the candidates are thinking. They didn't ask all the candidates what they thought was the problem, but they did ask a few of the candidates, and we want to get into that, but we have to sort of think about what's going to happen too.
I think what a lot of people are worrying about, we had the show yesterday in the midst of this crash and slight recovery, then crash again. And now that things seem to be coming up roses, I would imagine people are thinking, well, what's Ron Paul talking about? Everything seems to be okay. What would you say to those people?
Well, the one thing that I do not do is trade hourly or daily with stocks. I'm a long-term fundamentalist, but I still like to watch it. And what should happen? We have a lot of downturns, which we predicted all along would happen. There should be no surprises, but today shouldn't be a surprise. It'll be a surprise if the market today ends down a little bit. But it's up, significant, but for the month and the weeks, these kind of corrections are rather typical. So I don't think it means one thing. The fundamentals aren't being changed, and I think the situation of monetary policy and spending and debt and protectionism, all that stuff is still going to be there, and they haven't addressed that. But I found it interesting, and I think you did read a little bit about the comments made by some of the candidates. They didn't interview everybody. I didn't see them interviewing a certain senator from Kentucky, and I know what he might understand and understands about the business cycle. But nevertheless, they did go to a few individuals, and it was sort of fascinating because the one headline says, as market tumbles, GOP 2016 hopefuls blame China, they're the culprit, and Obama, of course, if you're a Republican, you blame Obama for everything, and you don't look at the facts. But in blaming Obama, one of the reasons they blamed Obama was there was too much debt. And with the Republican Congress, I thought all spending and taxes was supposed to be the congressional responsibility. So I imagine there's a few of those comments that found interest in what you were thinking about.
Well, it was very interesting. The populism on the campaign trail, I guess, is to be expected, but I think it does have some dangerous implications. I think Trump is the one that everyone looks at, and he had, I think he's trying to be cute, saying that when the Chinese president comes, no state dinner, hand him a Big Mac, and let's get down to business. But on a more serious note, he suggested that we need to put tariffs on all Chinese products and prepare for a trade war.
Yeah, that is very dangerous because it's terrible for the economy, and trade wars, and they do this in different ways. And China, it's in some ways are participating in that because they work with currencies rather than put on direct tariffs. They manipulate currencies, but it's not like China's the only one. I mean, the United States does it all the time. I mean, we manipulate our currencies, but no, the currency manipulation, the tariffs, the sanctions that are being put on, it causes friction. It's exactly opposite of what free market advocates propose, and that is what the founders believed in: trade with people, and have friendship with people. Not saying insulting presidents that are coming to the country. Oh, you're coming here to talk about business. Well, we'll give you a Mac hamburger. Yeah. And this guy's supposed to be serious, and then he said, "Well, what we need are tariffs." Well, I'll tell you what, those are dangerous things because, as many of us know, and you work very hard on the foreign policy issue, so often it does lead to something more than just a trade war.
Sure, you ratchet up the tensions, and for example, the dispute over these islands or something can be a spark. Wasn't it the U.S. trade policies with Japan in World War II that led to a lot of tension?
That's
or
right.
Before World War II that led to a lot of tensions?
Yeah, we put on strong enough restraints on their capital flows that they were canceled out of their oil. and it was like 4 or 5 months before Pearl Harbor. But you're not allowed to say that because it's unpatriotic if you try to understand what trade wars actually do. But Walker was interviewed, and he was one that said we ought to cancel that meeting. The president shouldn't meet with Xi because China manipulates their economy. Shock. Oh yeah, they buy stocks. Oh no, not in America. We would never do that.
No QEs.
No QEs. But what about Fiorina? She's supposed to be the business person and would maybe come up with a more free market answer, but I didn't find it in anything that she said.
Well, what she said is vague, but also I think dangerous. She said we need to put pressure on China. But what does that mean? What does it mean to put pressure?
Yeah, it's pretty vague, but it's threatening. And her one statement was, sure, China goes ahead and they do this and they raise millions of Chinese out of poverty. She recognized that and said that happened. Oh, but it was at the expense of the violation of civil liberties of the individual Chinese. And they're not connected, but it's a true statement. Yes, they violate civil liberties, but what does this country do? I mean, at the same time, we're living on borrowed money, printed money, all kinds of manipulation and bailing out the rich. At the same time, we have NSA spying on every American, and we lose, our privacy and our rights here at home constantly. So, to find a country that has some infractions, yes, we can note it. But to pretend that we can change it or pretend that we're saints is rather annoying. Do you think our relationship all of a sudden improved with China? No, they don't even want it to improve. And they want to blame, and they claim that you can't trust the Chinese because they're not wise enough to intervene in a proper way. That only Americans know how to intervene in the economy.
Someone like Huckabee shows a fundamental lack of understanding about the concept of trade. He said it's time to build our economy, not China's, as if trade is a zero-sum game where they get everything and we get nothing.
Right. And what's going on today is rather predictable. If one were more honest on the short run, not on the long run, but on the short run, China has been a great deal of help for us. We've been able to get away with exporting our inflation. If we weren't the country that issued the reserve currency of the world and people didn't take our currencies, this would have ended a lot sooner, like Zimbabwe. But China, has been willing to take our dollars. We print them out of thin air, we pass them out, and then we buy stuff, which is condemned by Trump. And so the standard of living for poor people go up because we buy clothes and shoes and everything else, maybe 1/10 of what they would pay if they forced everybody to make them in the United States. So they do this, and a lot of dollars leave the country, and then Chinese end up with $1.4 trillion. But instead of waiting to see the businessman who gets that money spend it back in here, the government takes it and monetizes it. So we print the money, and the debt is monetized by foreign governments. And what do they finally do? That means the money supply grows in China, which causes malinvestment, causes bubbles in stock markets and everything else. But what happens to the money that was sent over there? Well, the Chinese government then buys treasury bills. So you say, well, that's good. Absolutely, it's good for us on the short run, but it encourages us to run up debt. And so it's a machine that's been going on, and the bubble keeps building. It's a dollar bubble, and but to turn it around and have headlines that say, well, yesterday and all this collapse of the economy and the collapse of the stock market is China's fault. Yes, they're far from a perfect economy, and they're not free market people. I'm not sure too many Chinese economists have heard of von Mises, but nevertheless, it is so much of a stretch for us to have presidential candidates saying, well, it's the Chinese fault, and they ought to eat more hamburger, and we're not going to treat them to a steak dinner, and they're not smart enough how to regulate the economy, and they do it at the expense of civil liberties. We should be concerned about those things. We should be concerned about our healthy economy, but we certainly should be concerned about our civil liberties as well.
You know, you were talking about debt earlier, and I think this is probably a tie with Trump, but I would guess it almost takes the cake, and that's Chris Christie, where he says, the debt has been given to us in a large measure by the Chinese. The Chinese gave us our debt.
Yeah, well, I think we had to buy stuff. They foolishly gave us products, and we gave them a paper money, and of course we have a debt, and they give us money back. But that's hardly fair to say they gave us our debt. It was our spending. It's our government spending, corporate spending. But those things are happening in China too, because Austrian economists have been warning about China too, about inflation from the inflation of the money supply. Their money supply goes up because they monetize this debt. And it was predictable that their stock market and everything else would have to have a correction. And it's going to be a worldwide correction. It's just not going to be in China. You can't blame just China. And you can't blame just Obama. I mean, sure, he's a big government person, but are his economic policies a whole lot different than the Republican policies? I mean, this whole thing, oh yeah, it's Obamacare. Yeah, but Republicans have no intention on repealing Obamacare. And when Republicans have been in charge, they've expanded government medicine, expanded, education at the national level. So hypocrisy is something that can become rather annoying at times.
I wanted to ask you about this one part, because this is the actual article that you pointed out earlier as markets tumble, GOP's candidates blame China. But this is within the article, and to me it strikes me as an editorialization demonstrating an absolute lack of understanding of how economies work. And I'll just quote you a little bit from it. China's troubles raise doubts about whether its policymakers have the tools to keep their economy growing at a healthy pace.
Yeah, what they're referring to is that we have the tools and we're smart and we rescued our economy in 08 and 09. The tools were print, spend, debt, regulate, and continue to expand, the total debt. And they're claiming they're not smart enough to have these tools, but they're already involved in that. They've been doing that kind of stuff already, and they've been, and some of our candidates condemn them for buying stocks. What do you think we've been doing? How much does the American taxpayer owe? We might not have a legislation by the Congress and the Treasury's holding stock certificates, but how many trillions of dollars were used to buy a bad mortgage debt? So we didn't do anything to correct the problem. And that answer infers that we have the tools and the wisdom to do this, and all we do is make a bigger and bigger bubble, which we're capable of doing because we can print the reserve currency of the world. And as long as we're able to print the reserve currency, the bubble will get bigger and bigger, and eventually it will affect not just the stock market, it's going to eventually affect the bond market, because when the Treasury bills act like junk bonds, I mean, the ball game is over. It nearly was totally destructive in 1979 when interest rates went to 21%. Right now, interest rates are abnormally and historically low, but that doesn't mean things can't shift, because we've already seen cities and municipalities and some states are in bad trouble, and there's no way they're going to pay all these bills. Productivity is not going up, and the workforce is as low as ever. And we are facing a consequence which is going to involve not only the American people and the American stock markets, but the worldwide. It's going to be a problem. It's going to be more Greek conditions coming up, and we ought to prepare ourselves for that. But for me, the only way we can prepare for this is do our best to stop it, but accept the fact that the politicians aren't going to change it. I think the the statements made by the candidates right now indicate that they don't have the vaguest idea what's going on, and they are not willing to bite the bullet. Now you say, well, what do you mean? Trump, he's a tough guy, he's going to do it. But he's a protectionist. He's going to make it worse if he puts on tariffs and takes charge of the economy. We want the people to take charge of the economy, which means that we have to get rid of the Federal Reserve, get rid of the income tax, let the people go to work, let the people keep what they earn, don't violate their civil liberties, don't violate their privacy, and don't get involved in other nations. Then we could be free and prosperous. The world would accept this because it would be such a system that they would want to emulate. That would make the difference, but unfortunately, right now it's not on the horizon, but it still can come if we have enough people who understand the difference of where we should go and what we have, because there has to be a replacement. We can't linger like this. We could linger in total poverty and dictatorship for a while, but let's hope the American people will never accept that. And we have to have the type of reforms in this system where we talk about free markets and property rights and sound money. That would be the solution to all this, rather than say, oh, it's China's fault. We'll give them a hamburger and solve their problems. That won't be the answer. The answer can be found in liberty. Please come back soon to the Liberty Report. Thanks for tuning in.